much indeed. Well, I was going to apologize for sort of showing up on the wrong panel until I heard Louis' explanation of having written 2 speeches. I thought maybe I'd better apologize for not having written one at all. But thinking about what I was delighted to hear that we were invited to speak on whatever topic made sense to us, because I think that's been one of the beauties of the North-South Roundtable, is that you've drawn on so many varied experiences. Although I've not been part, everybody has started off by talking about the connection to the North-South Roundtable, and I have to say I was not part of the North-South Roundtable, but in listening to the litany of names and very substantive achievements, I realized how fortunate I have been to have been in the orbit, I think you can put it, of so many bright suns. And Richard, I would spell S-U-N-S, not S-O-N-S, bright suns of the South Roundtable who have shone so brightly and still shine, even though you are thinking of moving on. I've worked closely in many capacities with Richard, with Mahbub and Khadija, with Jim Grant, Rita, and Louis, and with Francis and Maurice Strong. And I still remember Jerry's showing me his business card that said "an economist with heart." And it's been a real privilege and to share in that vision of the North-South Roundtable, and to feel that in my own way in the bureaucracy that I was part of something bigger. I've always believed that there's not necessarily something bad about that. Being a bureaucrat doesn't have to be a bad thing. That the right sense of bureaucracy has to be you and me and the person in the next office working and helping to create change. And I've always felt that we've never fully taken advantage of all the incredible linkages that there are that there could be between the bureaucrats and the non-bureaucrats. That as someone in the system, I've always felt that I was a reformer, but that I could not do the job without the more radical person outside the system that was creating the environment within which change was possible. And that it's always been important for me to look for those kinds of linkages and as a way of making change. And the vision of the North-South Roundtable has, as we've seen and heard during the day, has had an enormous effect for change. It's so impressive to hear the list of the things that are happening now, which were given birth to the NSRT process. It's very encouraging. And as you bring the NSRT as a concept to a close, I think it's terribly important to believe that this effect will continue, and it must continue. There remain agents of change, and but it does need constant tending, and we do need to find ways to tend that process to keep it on track. It's very easy to despair, and I was a little struck by Mary Robinson's list of all the bad things that were wrong in the world this morning. I thought, because I like to think in terms of all the good things that are happening, and that's often my message, that under that there are so many things that still go on. Unfortunately, Mary's right, but hopefully we're both right, that there always are people who are working away either up or behind the scenes to make that change. I think it was Margaret Mead who said that, don't ever think that one person can't make a difference. In fact, it's the only that ever has. And that to me is one of the most inspiring comments. And I wanted to share with you, and Richard's usually the one who comes up with all the snappy phrases. One for you, Richard, or maybe you've thought of it already, But Jan Eliasson the other day in a meeting said that what we need is passion to get the thing done and compassion to get it right. And I thought that was very telling, and I think it rings to the discussions here. I certainly share Richard's faith in summits, and that I've been to a few of them, and even if it's only because leaders can be shamed, and that the idea of a summit means that everyone has to come showing what they've done and with something to say. And the value of a summit, and Nafis knows this intimately, is the work that goes before it and the incredible things that are put in place so that the leaders can come and say, my country has done that, and we've put in place these structures. And also then they're prepared to make commitments. In public they have to make those commitments, and the commitments happen. The issue, of course, is how we follow up, but the summits do create that agenda. They do create that opportunity to enable change. I also share his faith in the UN. It's certainly all we have, and it provides the place that we can come to do that. And this is why I feel that the miracle of the +5 summit was the extent to which, at a time of extraordinary rancor and ill among states, and those of you who were there in 2005 will know that it really was an extraordinary experience, and it seemed as if nobody would ever agree again. But despite that horrendous atmosphere, the international community was able to produce a whole new set of institutions to address what they felt was an enormous gap in the system. And that's something I'd like to just spend a few minutes on in terms of what's happening on the peace-building architecture. We used to talk about machinery of government. We're more lofty now. We talk about peace-building architecture and gender architecture. We all remember the Agenda for Peace of Boutros-Ghali in '92, and in the 15-plus years debate on this issue, there's been so many discussions and never quite gotten it right. We keep talking about, we've talked about the spectrum and the continuum from peace to development. We've talked about the gap between, and we've talked about the transition between peace and development. And we've never somehow managed to identify how to address these particular problems. At the same time, there was ongoing focus, and I noticed it came out in the discussion, and just as Cycler said, oh, I'm glad Carolyn just walked in, I'm glad she just walked, because I was going to refer to my own frustrations in the 90s about the debate on rewarding performance. And John, you remember, where's John, the ODC exercises with the IFIs, and the emphasis then in the IFIs and the Bretton Woods institutions, particularly on rewarding performance. And I always felt that that never addressed the issue of how do you get countries to be performing, and that we ran an enormous risk of letting too many countries fall off the shelf, and in fact that is what has happened. But at the same time, coming out of the Cold War period, there was also, at the same time, an increasing number of conflicts, and the early 90s was a time where the number of conflicts really peaked. But and the Security Council attempts in the middle of the 90s to deal with it were not entirely successful. We lived through the tragedy of Rwanda and Bosnia and Somalia. But at the same time, the debate was carrying on the link between conflict and development, and this came out in the last discussion. I won't spend too much time on it. But at this, and in parallel, the peacekeeping, the efforts of the Security Council were going through enormous change. That we tend to think of the tragedies of the mid-90s, but I think what we really have to revise our thoughts on that and recognize the extent to which those lessons are being learned. There have been some real successes now in peacekeeping. Andy Mack's report out of UBC and the Human Security Study, and the recognition of the reduction in the number of wars. But at the same time, as I said, the on the link between conflict and development, and the recognition that despite the successes there were too many countries falling back into conflict. And this is why I think that what happened at the Millennium Summit was really quite remarkable, because despite that highly politicized atmosphere, the world was able to recognize that this was the nub of the problem, and that they were prepared to agree on putting in place the architecture to try and deal with this. And that was the genesis for the Peacebuilding Commission and the Peacebuilding Office in the Secretariat and the Peacebuilding Fund. Very briefly, the Commission is 31 member states, which has a very precise mandate, and that is to bring together the actors, to mobilize resources, and to develop strategies for peace building.